So Niek, thanks for having us out here.
You're most welcome.
Get Wrapped, how long have you been in business?
Wow, that's going back a bit. I think about 32 years.
32 years, a long time.
I know.
You got into this in cars?
Yes, so it started with 3M Trimline, which is a distributorship owned by 3M. And they focus on doing graphics on vehicles, which in those days was a big deal. You know, graphics on cars, but also lettering at dealers, promotional stuff.
So graphics on cars like for promotion, that kind of thing?
No, actually, in those days, 4 years ago, people would have the biggest graphics on the side of cars and pinstripes and body side.
Okay, pinstripes, okay.
Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Or like Tony the Tiger on somebody's car or something?
I haven't done Tony the Tiger because that would be copyright, but something similar, like the craziest things really, like a big dinosaur on the side of a tracker or something like that. So sky's the limit. I remember the first time somebody from Consumer Impact Marketing said, do you guys wrap cars? And I go, yeah, we wrap cars. And later on going, what is a wrap actually? You know, it was like, it just got hot off the press. And a wrap was like a complete wrap of a car, which was at that point in time unseen. So we ended up doing some work for Pepsi, those are the only companies that could afford like vehicle wraps. So that's how we got ourselves into it. So I think as time progressed and technology progressed, it wasn't, graphics on cars weren't sort of the thing anymore. So we got into the commercial part of wraps, through the dealers, which are also commercial entities that need to promote themselves. So it turned in from the graphics to lettering at dealers, to doing something across the dealership level to promote on their vehicles too, but also their storefronts, different events that they were throwing. And then, the biggest reason we're in Oshawa was General Motors of Canada. So at that point in time, we were still subbing out the print part. Of course, they did their own design, and then we got into national programs. So slowly but surely, we sort of evolved, and we got more into the full wraps and large commercial stuff. And then GM said, hey, this guy from GM said, at CHQ over here, their head office, they have a big, beautiful building with a rounded glass piece. And they said, hey, we've seen something in Detroit. There's a PT Cruiser jumping right out of the glass. Can you do that? And I said, yes. And I remember walking to my parked car and going, how are we going to do that? Because it's like, how are you going to get to it, right? So we haven't done something on buildings. So we ended up putting a big stallage on the roof with the big, big buckets that come down when people wash windows to do graphics. So we ended up making a big pickup truck jump out of the glass. So that was the beginning of like a really big wrap. So
that was the first really gigantic wrap that.
Yes.
It's a pretty good moment for the companies.
Yeah, so we did well. So we got our feet wet and just going, okay, what's the next one and the next one? And we figured it out, right? So now we rappel from the roof on ropes, and we have specialists that wrap the side of a building without anything other than fall arrest, ropes in suits, and away you go.
And I've seen you in action. I've seen you doing that before. So Niek is TO Live's preferred graphics wrapping supplier, Meridian Hall, Meridian Arts Center, and St. Lawrence Center. And if you recall, we did, coming out of the pandemic, quite soon out of the pandemic, Canada Post did an event at Meridian Hall where they wanted to do a gigantic stamp, and you had to put that on the west wall of Meridian. You had to make sure that the wind didn't, it's got to be safe.
Yes.
And that was pretty cool to see, because you had some learning to do on that project.
Yes.
So I would presume that there's been a lot of that over the years, and I presume there's still that kind of thing. We were talking earlier about a scenario where we needed to do a quick change, and there's two corporate companies butting up against each other. And so what Niek came up with is the first graphic down would be for the second company, and we put the second companies down over top, do the event, peel it off, and then we go.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of science involved in this too. The materials that are used for that, you got to make sure that one doesn't peel the other one off and whatnot. So
yeah.
So a lot of R&D goes into all this as well?
Exactly. You make it up on the fly, but I mean, it's really based on good experience, but also trying to come up with solutions. So I tell people a lot, we're not a graphics company or sign company. we're solution providers, and that's totally true. So if you want the stamp on the side of a building, there's a lot that goes through that. There's like fall arrest. Can you get from a boom to do that? No, you can't. You have to rappel off the roof. Where are you going to tie off? Is it safe? Engineers get involved. You go through a whole process just to put that big stamp on the side, and then we figure it out. We do testing. 3M is a really big partner of us, so 3M has all that it takes and then some to give us technical advice. So we do tests. We had some time, so see how it lasts, how long it has to go on there, how nicely it comes to remove too, right? So there's all these things. You can have a beautiful stamp, and then when you take it off, and you still see a stamp because you rip part of the cement off. You know, these things can happen. So and then you said, oh, by the way, we also want to unveil it. So okay,
now put a veil on it.
Now we're in the unveiling business. So we ended up
That's true.
doing that black tarp, and then you know, just making sure that all goes well in a live moment of unveiling, you know.
We had one shot at it. It's not like we could put this tarp that's like 100 feet by 100 feet up and then test it.
Yes.
Niek put it up and had it on ropes and pulleys and stuff, and such that one of their executives could pull the thing, and it fell down. It looked awesome, and he did it. But that's a stressful moment.
You're right. I remember GM even, like when the Camaro came out, they introduced the Camaro was going to be the car that they were going to build in Oshawa. We did the unveiling of that too. So that's the second unveiling. But it was like, how many times do you test for this piece of fabric to go over top of this car? And you would say, well, your wrap cars, what does that got to do with the curtain? Well, we do a lot of stuff that is not really our forte, as in we don't have the experience, but then at the end of the day, every project has in common that if you figure it out and you test it and you find the right method, there's a way to figure it out. So that's why, you know, sometimes we do extra builds too. So and people come up with crazy things where they go, can you do that? You know, can you wrap a building completely in blue in the middle of the winter? No, you can't. But our producers from New York want it, and they want it now. Can you do it? Okay. Now you're going to spend $60,000 on putting scaffolding all around the building, get some heaters the size of cars, like 3 of them, just to blast heat in there just to get rid of the temperature. And then, yeah, we ended up wrapping that building in the middle of the winter. Yeah, we did it. We figured out a way to do it. So
the science of it, you got to, like, is it some kind of a brick cement building?
yes. This was a historic building too.
Historic building, but you cannot affix some of your material to something when it's freezing cold out.
Exactly. Yes. So it was arguably more to build a cocoon of like plastic around this thing with all that had to take place, and of course, you know, they had the power, thank God, because that took a lot of power to get it hot. But it ended up they wanted it up for 6 months. We guaranteed it. It ended up being 3 years before they took it off.
So you got that wrap to stick to that building for 3 years?
Yeah.
But did you have to have that cocoon up there keeping it warm all the time?
No. Okay. I got a pretty cool video that sort of takes you through the whole thing. But no, we kept it up for about 3 days because when vinyl's on, it still has takes time to cure. So we kept the heat going for 3 days after the install. So the whole thing took about maybe a week. But then, you know, we never expected it to be that long. But 3M again, right? 3M had the right product. We tested it. We knew that it wasn't going to be at the detriment of the building afterwards. And it got done, and it worked perfectly. So
that's very cool. What's the craziest wrap that you ever did? Like you did a plane one time, didn't you?
Yes, funny you mention that. Producers of a show called Mission Impossible.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the number 8's still coming, so it's still under wraps. But I think that's not. We're not talking out of school here. But there was a DC-3 that had like really modern markings on it, and it needed to be wrapped in something that had to fly to Svalbard, which is like a big island north of Norway somewhere, because that's where the scene took place, and this thing had to land and take off, and they had some fighting scenes, and you know, so part of the inside of the plane was wrapped, and then part of the outside of the plane, except for the wings were the right color. But the whole body of the plane, the fuselage, we wrapped. So I know the DC-3 is a huge plane, but it has a wingspan of like 60 plus feet. So this is a big, big project. But we figured it out. And they wanted it on there within 3 days. Then they wanted to do the shoot, and when the shoot was done, it had to fly back, and we had to remove it in 1 day. So that all happened again under the guise of using the right 3M product, you know. So it's really all about product, but it's not even as simple as just grabbing one, because then you know behind the props of this thing, like the airspeed is way harder, so you end up having to use different kind of activators, actually a different product to make it stick first. So there's a lot you got to figure out for contingencies, right? To make sure this thing, when it's in the chute, you can't have vinyl flapping outside of. But when this thing came back, it was just as perfect as when we dropped it off. And the funny part is that because of the mating of polar bears or something, they weren't allowed to land and take off again. So we may have to do this whole thing over again for the second shoot.
Really?
So now we know what we're doing.
Not a bad problem to have, though, right?
So and re.
One of the most complicated events that I would say it's complicated. It's multifaceted, all kinds of different activations going on in our spaces. Meridian Hall is the Elevate Tech Festival we've had every year for the last number of years. You get into that quite heavily. They do a lot of graphics. As I say, I think they might have upwards of 50 different partners, and 25 of which are going to do some kind of graphic. What goes into managing something like that with your team here, which we've had an opportunity to walk around, pretty cool. But how does that all come about? Like,
yeah. So yes, when you walk in, you see all these graphics. It looks like, okay, you wrap this place, but that's actually the easiest part, because in the beginning it's really much more about getting the different partners involved, and then they all come in and they're assigned a certain space. How do they work well together? Who's going to get what piece? Because Meridian Hall has a lot of beautiful space to wrap your brand. Like when you walk in, you got the big elevator wall, then you've got really a great place on the left and right, and then the fact that you can look up to the second floor, and then you got activations there, and then downstairs there's a whole other world of activations. So a lot of opportunities, because there's a lot of beautiful pillars there and walls. So
marble pillars.
Yeah. So then we believe that the best way to show a graphic is not to throw a rectangle here and a rectangle there. People can do that at trade shows, but in Meridian Hall, I think what we figured out is you got to let the graphics play with the space that you already have. So we've never added anything, and we made sure that the graphics sort of stayed and conformed with the space that was already there, like a wall or a pillar or an elevator.
Or a bar front.
Or a bar front. That's how we met.
So yeah, that reminds Niek of, both Niek and I, the story. It's a good story, and one that I use a lot. Way back when we had 1 year where we did 2 up fronts back to back. It was crazy, and the one kind of snuck in. Well, we didn't have a graphic supplier at the time, and a group came in, a supplier came in and put wraps on all the bar fronts. What happened was they left. They didn't even take them off, and so we, our ops people, myself, we'd start going and peeling off these wraps, and when we peeled them off, there was like a layer of glue, sticky film that we then proceeded to have our maintenance, housekeeping, ops people start trying to get off, and it was not coming off. It was a tough task to get it off. And so I'm sitting there looking perplexed, and Niek says, what is this? And I told you about it, and he said, I can have a couple guys in here and have that done in a day. And next day, they did work there the whole day, but there was not a sign of that glue on any of the bar faces. And then Get Wrapped was then our preferred supplier. And it's a pretty easy thing to tell other clients that have companies that they work with, sorry, we can't risk it, because that is one thing. There is a lot of opportunity for damage.
Yes.
And you've been stellar within that. But there has been a time or two where some kind of paint, and depending on how you've also taught us about how when we renovated in what was the Sony Center, 2008, 2009, we reopened 2010, and so we had all kinds of different contractors, and right down to the painting. And the processes that a painter does, like if it was multi-layered or something like that, that'd be one thing, but there was a scenario, might have been touched up,
yes,
and so some paint come off. But Get Wrapped had people there the next day or even that night. You did that on your own even, and then they'll work with our ops department now to they fix that. You've been with us ever since, worked with all kinds of different companies that we work with that bring into our 3 different spaces. And back to the Elevate one, would that be one of the like ones that you cover most of the available real estate for graphics at Meridian Hall?
Very much so, because when Elevate starts, you got a full house and it's buzzing with activity. So yeah, so Elevate is one of those things where every single available place and space becomes wrappable and is wrapped, because yeah, everybody wants to stand out in their own way, but it's magical the way when it all comes together, it all works very well together too. When there's projects like that, everything has to happen fast. We've got like a team of like 10, 12 people on that are all trained and know how to work well together, because we work on a regular basis. So I think that makes that work really well. So, and that goes from project management, like Amanda, et cetera, to go right down to making sure that, you know, whatever a customer saw creatively, the client saw, is actually going to be on that wall. So something you can't take for granted, because, you know, if you get the Pantone color of a MasterCard wrong, that's not a good thing. So we go through that very, very cautiously, and we understand that, yeah, we got to honor your space, and we got to honor the client's brand. That's why we're there, to elevate their brand, to use the word elevate.
You're not working like in a 16 by 10, you know, a poster size or whatever. You're working in like, as we said, he's wrapped a wall or a building and a plane. This is like, could be hundreds of feet by hundreds of feet.
Yes. The bigger the better for like graphics, you know? I want to wrap the universe.
Well, okay, so how do you know, I have trouble printing from an 8 by 10 to a 16 by 10, losing quality. How do you start? Like, it's a raw picture of something that has to be pristine in their quality, right?
Well, you know, MasterCard is actually a really good study. If you wanted to see how things work from start to finish, MasterCard had every element. It had like degree of difficulty installing, the Pantone colors, you know, a pretty demanding client who knew what their brand was and wanted it to look its best. So going through all those steps to make sure that you're not just going through the client back and forth to get the final artwork signed off, but then you're going through your internal system to make sure that everything you do in pre-press, including testing, make sure the Pantone's right, make sure that the matte versus gloss, that's all figured out and it stays, but it also comes off without removing paint. It's a feat, and it's something we really did well with MasterCard. These guys were over the moon when we were all done.
Awesome. So you say pre-test. You're the business experience with you you do design and production and installation. Is that how it is?
That's it.
Okay.
And we know what role to play, because that's another thing, right? You have designers on board, but designers don't always get the design. In the case of MasterCard, they have an internal department, very strict brand guidelines that they adhere to. So we give them templates. We make sure those templates are correct, of course, and they drop their artwork in a template, and then we translate it into making it work right. So that's the process. So as a design company, because we have 3 great designers on board, we know when to follow brand guidelines, and the customer's always right, to, okay, at which point in time do we need to raise the flag, because what you want here isn't actually going to work because there's a door handle in the way or whatever, right? So we're there to guide the client along the way with all the knowledge that they do have when it comes to wrapping 3-dimensional stuff. There's other elements that they have to be aware of that there's sometimes not, right? So it's a very much a story before it goes up.
Very interesting. 4 years on the other side of from the start of the pandemic.
Right.
You set out to grow your business, correct?
Right. Yes, we've increased since then. Probably about 50 or 60%.
50 or 60% from, like, say, as things started opening up after the pandemic?
Exactly,
Okay.
like before it, yeah.
So it was a strategic growth.
Yes.
And now at this time outside, would you say you're successful at that?
Yes, and I say that there's more to get, because like I said, you know, 95% or more of our stuff is referrals right now. What is out there to get still, right? By having strong social media, having a good website. You know, there's lots of ad agencies there that don't know who we are, and they could just by sharing our portfolio, we can get so much more businesses again. But be careful what you wish for, because you got to be ready for it as a team as well, right? And increase your capacity accordingly.
You brought up something, ad agencies. So ad agencies are like a target of yours. And now I'm looking down, because we do have a couple other team members down here. So you want to reach an ad agency on, you want an ad agency to go to Instagram and look at you, or an ad agency to look you up in Google, right? Yeah. But it's not like you're like getting salespeople to hammer the ad agencies with cold calls.
You're right.
That doesn't work like that
Doesn't
anymore,
work.
does it?
No. Yeah. No, that's not what it is anymore.
But you can subtly reach them. You can provide content that they want to see by putting it out there. And we're talking about social media.
Yeah, and if you've done well in a city like Toronto, which we have, because we're at a large area, many different places, and so people that will then look at that, they can resonate with whatever they've seen. Maybe they've been to one of those. Maybe they've seen a graphic, So having that sort of connection by showing off your portfolio and boasting about it, I think is really important too. But then them understanding that, you're used to dealing with ad agencies also helps, right? Because there again, like I said before, you need to know what your place is. Because if ad agencies have strict brand guidelines, well, then we know how to play that part and how to execute it exactly the way they want it. So,
and we work with a fair amount of companies that destination management companies that
yes.
put on events.
Yeah.
And that's so ad agencies, even an ad agency from time to time would come to us and say, hey, corporate ABC wants to do this event. They've hired us to manage it for us. Marketing agencies, experiential marketing agencies. There's all these different companies that might come to us to look for a venue space, but might come to you for graphics, right?
That's it. So once you're in a corporation, you've done a good job, then you kind of go sideways, right? Within interdepartmental stuff, because when you've done an okay job, people kind of forget about you. But if you've done a great job, people say, yes, I know someone, because I'm going to do you a favor, and you owe me one, right? That's the difference between a referral and you maybe could call those guys. But, so one works and one doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
But within GM, they have an ad agency. They pay good money, McLaren Momentum. It's a large machine. But we also deal directly with General Motors from time to time. And that's okay, because we have that relationship with both, and it works.
And you got to know when to step off the one. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because if you're working with an agency, you don't want to start.
Exactly. We don't want to create conflict of interest, and so everybody's on board with that, because the agency, I think, they don't feel threatened by us.
Right. And that's a very important thing. Again,
trust.
something that we have to do. Yeah. Right. And I will say that I can say from my experience, narrow experience within the bubble of a few event venues, with those agencies, I have had a number of them post-pandemic that they'll say, and they're big agencies dealing with big companies, they'll say, okay, we want to do graphics, and I'll say, we have a preferred supplier, and who is it? GetWrapped. Oh yeah, we know GetWrapped. I've done that. I've like 3 for 3 in the last 6 months probably, where they say
that's the best kind of advertising. That's the best way then you know that you're resonating, right?
Well, and so therefore I have no scientific backup on saying this, but I say it often. GetWrapped is top shelf, cutting edge, one of the best companies out there, and know their stuff. You can trust. And I'm not just pumping.
No,
your
you're
tires.
right, and I really appreciate it, because that's I know you mean that sincerely, and you know that I know that I'm only as good as my last job for you, and that's the way we look at it over here. It's not, oh, we've got all this experience, things can go up or down. No, an event has to work, and it has to work the first time. And if you don't continuously deliver, you're really only as good as your last job.
Yes. It has to work the first time. Canada Post putting that gigantic stamp up there. I was nervous.
Yeah, it's something we haven't
I don't
done.
know how but it went off without a flaw. That was a great event. So,
yeah, I kind of wake up with those things because you do take it personal, and I think that's the other thing. We all take it personal here. I think that's another thing. Like people can walk in with their hands and their brains, but you gotta have that heart too for what you're doing, right? So I think that's the magic formula over here.
So any other components about the business that I'm not that you want to talk to us about?
Well, I think we've talked about the variety of it, right? And I think as a company like ours, I think it's important to keep that alive, like go into different areas. I like challenges, so when somebody comes and asks us to do something that hasn't really been done, like those couple of examples we talked about, I think that's a great challenge. It keeps you young and alive and gets the team going, and when it all works out, everybody's just over the moon, right? So we have a great team here, and it's all about people. So our company culture is very important, and we make sure that a client will feel that on the other side because we're on their side of the table. Whenever they have problems and challenges, we don't go, well, this is what we do, this is what we can't do. There are no boxes. We're just on your side of the table. We have a problem, we fix it together, and then we're done. So, but I think having that mix, like, you know, doing institutions, schools, hospitals, but also a lot of event spaces, but also, you know, an NFL office we do, and it looks great. All of a sudden we got the Canadian league going, the soccer league going, saying, hey, you know, we want some of that too. So
you've done an NFL
referrals.
Office?
Yeah, we did in Toronto.
Oh, for when they had the NFL games here, or?
Yeah, I think that there's a fair-sized NFL office in Toronto.
Is that right?
Surprisingly, yeah.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of course, advertising that's happening in Canada as well. So they have a large presence here.
Cool. Yeah. And the culture down here is good? Or in this workplace, it's good?
Yeah, definitely.
I think that's so important, and I think it's so easy. Like you can't have it go by the wayside because you're asking a lot. When we get crazy requests, that's a lot of asks for everybody around here. And for a team like us to rally around, we also have to make sure that on the other side, when people need time off and things aren't going their way for whatever reason, and we all listen and talk to each other. So it's one big team. There's not a big sort of hierarchical structure. So how do you get a system that really works from start to finish? How do you not create something where people go, I'm going to sit here and wait until somebody gives me something to do? It doesn't work like that over here. Everybody's
awesome.
very independent.
It's awesome, but in today's day and age, it's extremely important. But I do believe that, and we do have some employees down here, some team members down here. I think a lot of people fake it. You know what I mean?
You're right. You can put values on a wall and make them look really good. Yeah. I know a company can do that, but you have to then be accountable to everybody around you to and discuss those values and make sure that is not just a pretty word on a wall. Right?
Absolutely. It's good to hear, and it's a good vibe coming in here.
Awesome.
But it starts with you.
Thank you. But you know, I can't underestimate, like, I'm nothing without this big team we've got over here of people that just love working here.
Awesome. It's like I not only want to get my building wrapped, I want to come here to work.
We got a new employee, guys.
There you go.
Make room.
What will we get him to do?
I don't know. We'll think of something. He's a great guy.
Nothing.